Very good. Welcome to Satsang. Everyone here and everyone who's joining us online tonight, for me tonight, or for us, and for you perhaps the European part mid-morning, and in Malaysia, I don't know, Emily, it's afternoon. It's always an honor and a blessing to share this space. Maybe we start tonight with just a little sitting, maybe just 15 minutes, just sitting silently, just allowing whatever the day has given us, allowing it to just gently fall off, and we are just here, just present, nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to reach. In day-to-day life we are always a little busy wondering about the next moment and believing that the next moment promises something that is not here now, until we realize everything we ever wanted is already here now. That's a provoking statement. Don't believe it. Just let it be a possibility. inside. You can take a deeper breath. Gently come a little bit to the surface, becoming aware of the body. Let the mind at rest. I want to continue to oh good, I thought I heard something. I want to continue with the song of Mahamudra from Tilopa, because somehow it's so close to what we are touching when we go into meditation, and in no way I can, compare myself with Osho's comments. But I like it to be alive just for now, what comes. Because Tilopa has such a clear way of saying things. Now, we've been sitting in silence, and for some of us perhaps the mind was happening, and for some of us we were a little bit more still. So the song continues. Cut the root of a tree, and the leaves will wither. Cut the root of your mind, and samsara falls. The light of any lamp dispels in one moment the darkness of long kalpas. The strong light of the mind, in but a flesh, will burn the veil of ignorance. Let's look at this one first, and it goes on in a moment. Cut the root of a tree, and the leaves will wither. Cut the root of your mind, and samsara falls. I think this is really, really important for us to let in that anything we do with the mind, purifying the mind, trying to get out of the mind, resisting the mind, therapizing the mind, bringing a better feng shui into the mind, keeps the leaves of the mind alive. So our mind is so much into becoming, into getting somewhere, into a liberation, into a place later, which is called the seeking. And I'm not sure about you, but I've been seeking for so many years or lifetimes, thinking there is something to find, but the seeker wasn't aware of itself that whatever the mind is doing, it is watched, it is seen, it is revealed. We could not say a single word if we wouldn't see this expression of the mind. We couldn't say a single sentence without that which is aware of it. We couldn't do any action And that is in contradiction to everything that I learned before. We couldn't do any action if there wouldn't be a witnessing consciousness that watches the action. Can you follow that? So the attempt to witness is already an attempt to do something with the mind so that the mind understands the witnessing. But even if the mind doesn't understand witnessing, witnessing is happening. And this tiny little shift from the content, every one of us, most of the time, is so involved in the content of our thought process, in the content of our beliefs, in the content of our sense perceptions, what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. That is what appears to be our life. And the reality of our life, which is that which is witnessing all of it, which is the space for all of it, which is always here at any moment, that we overlook. Why? Because it's not a thing. Why? Because it's not an object. Why? Because I am not a thing. Cut the root of your mind and samsara falls. The moment you don't believe any of your thoughts, what is left? The mind says, well, then there's nothing left. Well, that's who we are. What is left, that witnessing consciousness, doesn't go anywhere. This is where I misunderstood Osho for years. Because he kept saying, be aware. And my mind says, okay, I need to be something that is aware, for example, of speaking, or aware of the hand moving, or aware of how I eat, or aware of the taste. And ultimately, this has been a helpful training for the mind, but it was still the mind. And that which is aware, that which is witnessing every little bit of everything in our life, is not the mind. That's why our attention doesn't go there. It's not a thing. Our attention goes to things, goes to sounds, goes to sensory experiences, goes to visions, goes to auditory experiences. It always goes to something. And then we try to define ourselves through something. And if you look back, when we were a little kid, and we slowly developed a sense of self, and slowly discovered that, especially when teenage time came, that I can do things myself. That wonderful illusion of a separate self needed to develop itself. There's nothing wrong in it. That's what we call ego. It needed to appear as myself. And then we heard in many spiritual circles, well, be yourself. Well, how can we be anything else than that witnessing self? Can you follow that? It's so simple. And then the mind calls it enlightenment, which is kind of a great, huge word that we have to kind of pursue our whole lifetime and sit torturous hours of meditation, hoping that it will deliver what we already are. What a wonderful play. No? He calls it samsara. Cut the roots of your mind and samsara falls. Every definition of ourselves falls. It doesn't mean the manifestation of it in form falls, but it, that which is aware, sees all other identifications fall. I have a Taiwanese friend who went to a master in China who lives alone in the mountains. And I asked him, well, he came to many of my groups in Taiwan, and we thought we are really on the path. And I said, well, what did you do with the master? He said, whenever I opened my mouth and said one word, he interrupted and said, drop it. Yeah, drop it. Drop it. Drop it. So the whole day, I think he was there for a week, he only heard drop it. Nothing was valuable. Not even the most beautiful philosophical thought about our human nature was validated as something real. Drop it. So, what happens when we just drop it? And when anything arises, we drop it. Everything stays the same. Just the thoughts about that which appears in consciousness, the interpretation loses its grip. Cut the root of your mind and samsara falls. That's what he says, just drop it. The light of any lamp dispels in a moment the darkness of long kalpas. What is the light of any lamp? The light of any lamp is that which we have been from the very beginning and that which we will be after the very end, which is at least said through the human form: awareness, consciousness, presence, godliness, silence. Many, many words to describe what is left when we dropped it. And when that shift of attention begins to happen, we will have these moments where, in normal language, at least in German language, we have this thing where it says, the light within went on. Mir ist ein Licht aufgegangen. Ne? Bing! Well, what is that light? That light is a metaphor for the space of awareness that when it falls on an object like mind or thought, it is seen for what it is. That's why Krishnamurti called it again and again choiceless awareness. When we look into our mind, it's always choosing. I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. I want to be good, I don't want to be bad. I want to have nice thoughts, I don't want to have ugly thoughts. Both. And right behind it is that tiny little light that maybe sometimes gets stronger, that dispels in one moment the darkness of long kalpas. Kalpas is a Hindi word for, I don't know how many 100,000 years. One kalpa. The strong light of the mind, and here the mind is written in a capital M, in but a flash will burn the veil of ignorance. So what is ignorance on that level? It is not the knowledge that we kind of cherish, especially in the West, where we learn more and more and more and more and become kind of scientists. And we still feel ignorant. And the veil of ignorance is basically the veil, the curtain that covers up our true nature, that covers up the space that is aware of all experiences. Is that space created? No, it's always here. Well, maybe, I don't know. It must have been here even before the earth came into being. It may still be here when the earth and the whole solar system disappears into the black hole. What is left is space. And the mind cannot fathom this infinity that we actually are. So the little mind, the little me, tries to put itself into a tiny little box called body-mind and defends that little box against other boxes. And we look through it a little bit and it's totally absurd. But it's also a joy because nothing needs to change. The drama of life in the body has its own momentum. It's a wonderful movie, isn't it? It's a wonderful show. And we are not just watching it, we are in it. We are the actors, we are the creators, we are the scriptwriters, we are the directors, we are all of it. And nothing of it. So the strong light of the capital mind, what he calls mind, this is kind of the difficulty. So many people have tried to give it words. And like Lao Tzu says, the Tao that can be spoken is never the real Tao. God that we can, mention is not the real God. Silence that we can label is not the real silence. Darkness that we can label as something like darkness is not the real darkness. So words don't work here, and yet we use them. And I was often wondering why Osho, for 35 years, has been talking 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the evening, saying the same thing in 10,000 different ways. And we always, our minds always said, yes, I understand. And then the next day you come into the Buddha hall and he cuts your head about that understanding and says, no, that's not it. And he's still around giggling because there's still people, more and more people, thanks God, that point towards a glimpse of truth. So the strong light of the mind, which means the strong light of the recognition that we are pure consciousness in a flesh, will burn the veil of ignorance. Now this is the highest truth. Now he kind of steps down into explaining a little bit. Whoever clings to mind sees not the truth of what is beyond the mind. That's from that verse and long explorations, my famous map was born, that I teach in the counseling training, where the center is empty, infinite, spacious, attributeless. That's who we are. And it's surrounded by our gifts and our shadow. So the moment we cling to our gifts, which is maybe the more goody-goodies, and the moment we cling to our shadows, which is the bad stuff that we don't want. No? The moment we cling to any of our story, and how many stories do we have, and which stories are gluing to us more? Usually not so much the positive stories, the joyful stories, the ecstatic stories, the expanded stories, because that is closer to our being. Usually what we cling to is our misery. Forgive me. No? And then somebody points it out to you and you get really angry, But I'm so traumatized. It's as a phenomenon of development of therapy. Kind of, if I look at my own life, I started as a doctor and treating symptoms, and then looking at the origin of the sickness, which is not the symptoms. The origin is maybe an energetic disturbance, and then learning therapy and working with the psyche and esoteric sciences and chakras and all these wonderful concepts to find a more refined definition of ourselves, not recognizing for a long time, at least for me, that I was just clinging to other layers of the mind. Even though I knew that the center is empty. But that's so boring for the mind, isn't it? Emptiness? What do you mean? When I can have a trauma, when I have a relationship problem, when I can have, a deep conflict, when I feel betrayed, when I, and all that stuff. And in the moment, the whole humanity clings to a thought called COVID-19. It's amazing. It gives us definitely an identity that we need to struggle against, that we need to be vaxxers or non-vaxxers, that we fight about which therapy, apart from vaccination, works better. And you look into the internet and you get totally confused because everybody has a different opinion. But there's something that somehow came across my mobile phone this morning, which is, I don't know if you ever met him or heard him talk, is Bruce Lipton. And Bruce Lipton's, this is so fascinating, and it is so strange that it's not, since many years, mainstream science. What he found, and listen carefully, this is so important to understand. We think we are, an outcome of our DNA and RNA. We are programmed beings with a certain program. And the DNA is responsible for how we develop that program into a physical body. Now, Bruce Lipton, he studied stem cells, and stem cells are embryonic cells that have the potential to become anything. And he did an experiment. He was cloning stem cells, which means cloning means he manages the cell to divide, the nucleus to divide, and then you have absolutely identical manifestation. No? This 2 cells are identical, and then 4 cells identical, and then 8, and then 16, and No? So he was cultivating stem cells, and he was wondering, because it was a common knowledge that stem cells actually can take shape of different things that we need in the body. You can regrow an ear, for example, with stem cells, or you can regrow anything, any organ. what is the decisive factor? It must be the DNA in the cell that then replicates and becomes a DNA of the earlobe, for example. But what he found is that he changed the environment of the culture. So a group of stem cells he put into one type of culture that nourishes the cells, and another one that maybe was a little bit more acidic, and another one that maybe was a little bit more alkaline. And suddenly this group of stem cells that is identical with everybody else became muscle tissue. Another group of stem cells, exactly the same DNA, became blood vessels, and another one fat cells. So that was revolutionary. He discovered that, I think, 30 or 40 years ago, and did a lot of publications, and nobody listens. And the big genetic scientists say this is all nonsense. DNA, RNA, this is it. No? And
but it's the environment.
It's the environment. It is the environment that defines how and what we develop. Now, can you extrapolate that into our being? In the moment, the environment we live in this world, or the majority, is fear. No? Fear creates a certain response in the body-mind that then creates a certain psychological identification, and then many people get sick. It's why this is like this, or how this happens, I think that's not yet found out. But if we just realize this, then it makes sense that we choose an environment like this one, where there's meditation, where there's love, where there's mutual support, and suddenly, that can become kind of the environment in which we all flower. Or we believe the mind environment, the conceptual environment, the scientific environment, and get lost. So, what to choose if we have a choice? And there, I think meditation is probably the master key. At least, Osho called it. It's the last thing in our laundry list, but it's the first thing in deeper realization that we are not the mind, and that we can decide our own environment. And of course, the environment is also the food. No? If you live on junk food, like most of America, that creates a very interesting environment. No? So food, lifestyle, and so on. So we are very, very lucky here in the Malambimbi environment. No? So whoever clings to the mind sees not the truth of what is beyond the mind. And what we found is that which appears like nothing is actually the source of everything. Which means our potential, that you could say the flowering of our nothingness into form, is infinite. We have an infinite potential. We could do anything we want. It is just that we somehow choose to live that life that we are living right now. No? But on one level, we could change it, but not through these many courses that promise you can make $1 million, just change your beliefs. That's maybe possible, but it doesn't change much. It still keeps you clinging to money. But we are incredibly capable. And for those of you who have changed your life a few times in this lifetime, you know it's possible. I used to be a doctor in Germany, and suddenly I'm sitting here brabbling away around consciousness. How did that happen? No? So whoever strives to practice Dharma finds not the truth of beyond practice. That is such a guillotine for all the practitioners, no? For all the Vipassana people.
Read that again, please.
Yeah. Hold a second. Whoever strives to practice Dharma finds not the truth of beyond practice. If we let that in, then we maybe don't need to become a Buddhist monk, and we don't need to sit in Vipassana for 12 hours a day. We don't need to kind of... Yeah. No? So whoever strives to practice Dharma finds not the truth of beyond practice. He knew this, I think, a few hundred years ago. How come we don't get it? No? Because we are so caught in becoming something better later, which is hopeless, because we can only be who we are. And that who we are betters itself from within effortlessly, just like every flower starts with a bud and it betters itself into a flower. Is there any effort? No. It's the environment. If you change the environment, the flower wilts. If you give it the right environment, and Melly has a green thumb. Since Melly is here, the garden flowers like crazy. To know what is beyond both mind and practice, one should...
I found this on the web for what is beyond both.
So it's on the web. Thank you, Siri. It's okay, we didn't talk to you. These are these divine happenings. Isn't it just that which is beyond mind? No? Okay, to know what is beyond both mind and practice, one should cut cleanly through the root of mind and stare naked. To know what is beyond both mind and practice. No? It doesn't mean at the end of mind or practice. It doesn't mean once you have achieved mind or practice. It is what is beyond. And what is beyond is, of course, impossible to understand with the mind, because it is beyond mind. It is beyond concept. It is beyond belief. It is beyond ideals. It is beyond projection. It is beyond any idea of oneness. So the mind cannot follow it. That's why it's not really interesting for the mind. No? That's why there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people sitting here. 8. No? It could be so wonderful if everybody would suddenly become aware, wait a minute, I've been, it was fun. If I look back, my studies were fun, that was worth it. But they were not liberating me, nothing of it. No? So, to know that, one should cut clearly through the root of mind and stare naked. So what happens when we stare naked? This is one of the 112 meditation techniques that Shiva gave to his beloved. It's called looking as the whole, or looking from emptiness. We can practice this for a moment. Just instead of letting your eyes move to the object that the eyes touch, just stare naked. Just let your eyes relax and let them become windows that are not looking out. We're not looking out to the mind, but we're looking in. We allow the impression of whatever the eyes perceive, which is a whole huge vision field, and let it come in. One should cut cleanly through the root of mind and stare naked. Do you notice when you allow the visual field enter your eyes, something inside shifts, something relaxes? Can you feel that? Like, And suddenly the interpretation of what the eyes receive is not there. There's no need to interpret or judge So this is a few moments where the mind is simply cut. Now the habit is then to go back into the mind, but perhaps we can use this as a so-called no practice during the day sometimes. Staring naked. It's like being stoned. Yeah, I mean, marijuana makes this chemically possible, but maybe we don't even need dope for it. No? Mm. One should thus break away from all distinctions and remain at ease. Can you feel that we are suddenly at ease? We stare naked. And suddenly, all the stories that the body-mind holds can relax. One should thus break away from all distinctions. Well, maybe it's not even a breaking, maybe it's just a letting go. And staring naked, suddenly there's presence in the room. There's not so much mind. Anything to say to this? Any insight from your side? Any discovery or question that comes up? And we can, of course, ask the friends around the globe who are joining us online also, can you follow that? It's so simple. To call it anything special is almost impossible. Staring naked. And today we have Melly here, and Melly will read your comments. If you have anything that is important, she will pass it on to me. So even while we check whether there's a comment, we can stare naked. No expectations, no distinctions, no hopes, no becomings. I think this is something that we have not learned from our parents. No? Our parents keep telling us to distinguish. No? And distinction is very subtle. Everything, I don't know about you, but the mind, when I look through the mind, everything the mind sees, it will give it an interpretation. It will say beautiful, ugly, uninteresting, boring, amazing, exciting. No? Now these stories are kind of make us human. It's no problem in it. The problem becomes a problem when it becomes our identity. Melly gives me a sign. Okay. Sahaj, hi.
Melting into the unknown, melting into the beloved, it is exquisite, being here-ness.
Being
Here-ness.
here-ness.
Here.
Being here-ness. Thank you, Sahaj. Can you say it slowly and I repeat it, then it comes through the microphone.
Melting into the unknown.
Melting into the unknown.
Melting into the beloved.
Melting into the beloved.
It is exquisite.
It is exquisite.
Being here-ness.
Being here-ness.
Yeah.
That's another way to say it. No? And I like the exquisiteness. No? It's a... It is what... If you have ever been to India and you meet a master, a real one, one that knows that he is not, there is an exquisiteness that just kind of blows you away. And how come this whole idea of master and disciple is in the West, it's not really on, because the ego, the sense of self, wants to assert itself against any kind of authority, not understanding that the master is actually empty. And what happens when there's a true communion, some of us here have been in Pune for longer or shorter time, or be with Osho when he was in the body. And to be in this presence makes the inner mystery resonate with it. Not the body and not the mind. I mean, Osho also talked to our mind to keep it busy while his transmission was something else, was silence and exquisiteness and love. And I don't know anyone in this world that has been so loved as Osho by his disciples. So who is loved? The exquisiteness of nothingness that is recognized out there, because it's very hard to conceive in here until we have more and more glimpses. Right? One thus should break away. So I'm going to read this whole thing one more time and let it resonate with your own deepest understanding. Don't try to grasp it with the mind. Cut the roots of a tree and the leaves will wither. Cut the root of your mind and samsara falls. The light of any lamp dispels in one moment the darkness of long kalpas. The strong light of the mind in but a flash will burn the veil of ignorance. Whoever clings to mind sees not the truth of what is beyond the mind. Whoever strives to practice Dharma finds not the truth of beyond practice. To know what is beyond both, beyond mind and beyond practice, one should cut clearly through the root of mind and stare naked. One should thus break away from all distinctions and remain at ease. I think we need to sit with that a little. Just feel how we are sitting silently. What we call mind, all these thoughts, they're still here, but perhaps they settle a little, just like Sogyal Rinpoche has this beautiful poem, Rest in Natural Great Peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thoughts, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in great natural peace. Nothing to do, nothing to undo, nowhere to go, just resting. And the mystery, this field of presence, permeates more and more all of our selves. And we could sit like this for quite a while. Just as a symbol, in many spiritual practices there are candles and candlelight, perhaps as a symbol of the light of presence, the light of awareness that cuts through our whole past, through the endless kalpas of unconsciousness. Just one ray of light. So I want to dedicate the light of the candle today to that light within. think Tilopa was right. It starts with a tiny little light, but it's enough. Any comments or questions that are open?
Nicole and Paolo said it's so nice just to drop it.
Just to drop it, yes. Just to drop it. So the environment, no? Until further notice, we will have satsang every Friday evening. And slowly, I think you can bring your friends. And around the world, just spread the message. Last weekend I had a very beautiful course, an online course. I don't know if anyone here joined it. It was a Tantra course that was organized by Sweden. And we may have a Tantra 2 also online. Of course, it's just a pointer towards the possibilities of bringing that infinity into your relationship and into your sexual relationship if you have one, and find the resting place, the receptivity, the openness, the space, even in the most vital activity. Sex is what we are made of. So if that interests you, I can forward you the link once the link is happening. And otherwise, I say thank you. Thank you for being here. Be gentle with yourself. Don't be hard if you don't understand what Tilopa says, because the mind cannot understand it. But something inside of us knows it already. And have a beautiful rest of the evening. And there's tea and hot water and maybe even a cookie. I have to see if we have cookies for you, if you want to have a cookie. And have a beautiful evening. Thank you. And thank you around the world. Namaste.